Welcome to the Solo Experience. I'm your host, Ryan, and we're going to be talking more about AV like we do every day, or not every day, but every time we get on here. And today's topic is going to be screen size versus viewing distance. And I think it's all about hoopla. Because these calculators, man, how old are they? But before we get into that, what have we been doing this week? I don't even remember. Oh, we looked at a modified lens. I say I don't even remember every time because I don't remember, but I looked at a modified lens and didn't do what we needed it to do. So it's going back. And I think now, not entirely sure what we're going to do because the measured distance or the measured native contrast was roughly the same to the native contrast that the existing lens was putting out. And to be fair, the things that were being done were things that have had success on the M4K. And we don't know that the lenses, those changes would be fruitful on the actual 4K 35. They're just on the E-shifters. So we kind of went in with hopefulness, but with the understanding that it may not work, and it didn't work. So we're back to not having a modified lens. There was some significant issues with color gradation and aperture placement where you could see the new aperture that was put in, mainly because of lens shift and where it needs to go in my room. Like you could absolutely see it. So back to the drawing board on that. That sucked. But in positive news, one thing that I did do was I created a command called !playlist. And this should output the title playlist that I have. And I need to tell SoundIs to duplicate the playlist for Spotify. Oh, there you go. It's a little bit too long. I need to get that on one comment, but whatever. You guys get the idea. That is the playlist that I update whenever I find something new that's worthy of the system. And it's a pretty large playlist of my favorite stuff that I use to demo, that I use to sometimes enjoy. It's just my go-to playlist. It's got 314 tracks on it right now. And I don't know that there's a bad track on there. And it is a consortium of different tracks. So right now this is on title. While I'm thinking about it, let me actually update this so that we can synchronize. So I want to synchronize. I'm using SoundIs to synchronize these sound. That one. Where is that on Spotify? If I were this on Spotify, where would I be? I got a lot of playlists on Spotify. This one. Confirm. Push the playlist source track list automatically destination. No. Oh, shit. Ah! It's so confusing. Where'd that sound demo one go? Sorry. Confirm and continue. We're going to push the playlist to Spotify, and we want to push it to here. Confirm and continue. And I want to do this each day. And we want to replace the playlist destination tracks. Yes. And we want to configure. Don't want to shuffle. Don't want empty. Okay. There. Let's see if that works. Okay. It's on title. Hasn't done that yet. How do I run now? All right. So it's doing it now. So I'm going to add Spotify one to this because I do have a Spotify playlist, sound demo. And they're going to be exactly the same. So you guys can play this back on Spotify or title. Copy link. And we're going to put this on title. There we go. And then Spotify. Boom. There. Okay. It should be done. Should be done. So now if we do this and we do playlist. Come on. Come on. You can do it. There it is. But it screwed up the you dingus. Screwed up the formatting. Let's just do this. Let's just get rid of that. Let's just do that. All right. So I updated it. Now let's try it. Playlist. Got rid of all the gibbery jab beforehand. I don't know if it's on timeout. There you go. So there's the playlist. So you got Tidal and Spotify. So those are playlists that I update. The latest song that I added, there's 314 tracks on there, is Nobody. Well, it may not have updated on that. Let me. Nobody Knows. Oh, those are recommended. Is Walk by John Do Voyage. So, well, yeah, getting there. Hey, Ryan, have you heard of the Dayton Audio IM6 calibrated measurement microphone for phones and tablets available for Parts Express? And if so, I have no idea. That would be an interesting one to actually try. I don't know. I can't see why it wouldn't work. What measurement application do you use on a phone or a tablet? Not that that necessarily matters as much as the microphone, but what are you using that with? Which measurement mic do I use? I can show you. Hold on. I broke them out yesterday. You probably can't hear me. Okay. These are little guys. I had them out yesterday because I was doing a calibration. So it's the MM7150s. They're little microphones, full XLR. They're not USB. This is the SPL calibrator. So this guy goes like this. And they merge like that. And this plays a test tone. And then you know what the test tone it's supposed to play is supposed to be at. So I've got 94 and 110. And then you calibrate your measurement software or your audio interface so that it reads, if this is outputting 110 dB test tone or 94, it reads 110 dB or 94. So that way you've got a calibrated SPL meter. That's how you should do it. So the one that is in the Mad VR Experience Center is 100% calibrated using that measurement mic. So I know what it's playing, what it hears. That is the sound level, sound pressure level that is actually occurring at that space. So it's the MM7150s. I have 4 of them. So I had them out in an array yesterday at somebody's place, did a calibration of the subs, and man, it was so much better. We did the maximum number of filters we did. It was 4 subs. There was a 24, but it was being used as near field. So there were 4 subs that we were actually calibrating. And the most filters we used on any sub was 3. So we had a total of 10 filters for 4 subwoofers. That was all we used. And everything else was time alignment. Came out good. Came out nice. Wasn't perfect, right? Because you still had some deviation, but I'm not chasing perfection because the more you use, a lot of times, worse it's going to get. And we were just presenting this to Odyssey. So we got it close, everything time aligned on a mini DSP, and then gave it to Odyssey, added some filters because we needed some pretty big drastic cuts. He was sitting on mode. And we couldn't really move subs, but came out good. Came out very good. Yeah. Calibrators for measurement mics are pretty important when you're doing SPL stuff. People don't realize that. But when you're looking at a measurement mic, right? And you've got it on especially on an audio interface that's not USB or even USB because you don't know what the voltage and stuff is as it comes back. I'm assuming. I don't know that about USB, but the voltage changes. And theoretically, if the voltage changes, it should change. Electrical engineer is going to tell me I'm wrong, but my brain tells me that if the voltage changes, it should change the SPL that's reading on something like REW if it's USB, if the measurement mic's long enough. I don't know how it's being coded. I guess there's a digital audio interface in the microphone, so maybe that's all BS. Don't listen to anything I just said. Just ignore that. But on XLR microphones with an audio interface, an external one, you absolutely need one, because if you just plug it in, you have no idea what the SPL is, because it's dictated by the audio interface, which isn't calibrated. So you got to calibrate it, and then you know. Then you know. And then I also got, which I was not aware of, REW has a pro version, and it allows for multi-mic interfaces. So I can run my mic array on REW, which is awesome. I did not know that was a thing, and it was only $100. And I'm like, oh yeah, we're doing that. So that was great. That is great. It comes with a calibration file. That's for equalizing frequencies. I don't know how, because I'm not smart enough. I don't know what that does with overall SPL for like an SPL meter. I don't know how that would work. I would assume that you would want to take your measurement microphone and compare it against a third-party SPL meter and then use that to calibrate. If I remember correctly, against a lot of those, they were very different. What the SPL would read on a measurement microphone and what an SPL meter would read, very, very different. So I think you still want to calibrate. For so E4 Superfly says for Chernobyl uses that you have to use their dedicated mic. And then for Storm, I use these MM7150s. All right, so let's jump in. If anybody needs the playlists and stuff, you just type !playlist. They are there. I update those quite frequently. I listen to stuff several times a week and try and update things. But let's talk about today's topic, which is screen size versus viewing distance. I think this is all a bunch of crap. I think there's some recommendations because people like to be told what to do. They don't like to make their own decisions. They want somebody else to make the decision for them. And I think a big part of that is because they want to have somebody to blame if that thing is not right. They don't want to blame themselves. I don't have a degree in psychology. I feel like that's a big part of it because the people are around, they don't like making their own decisions. They don't like being in charge of their own destinies. And I feel like a big thing is an excuse to say, hey, this was wrong. And they don't have to blame themselves. So the more I've done this, the more installations I've done, recommendations I've done, helping people through projects and stuff, the more I've realized that in almost every case, bigger is better. Let's look at a viewing distance calculator. This is one, just a random one, but it says it's got the recommendations in chat. If you guys have one that is more accurate than this, I am fully open to sharing it. But this is a viewing distance calculator. So I gave it my screen size, 165 inches at 4K. It says I need to be between 16 and a half and 26 feet for that screen size. 26 feet is outside my back wall. So my back wall is 21 feet away from the screen. This says I would need to effectively add another 6 feet on top of that. That is insane. This is like saying my room's roughly 28 feet long, so it's a little bit off this, but this is like saying I'm going to put a 165-inch screen on my front wall and then put my couch at the other side of the room, which is wall to wall, 28 feet away, and that's the appropriate viewing distance. I feel like I need binoculars. That's crazy. I realize that's the long part of it, but that's insane. And supposedly, that's the THX ideal recommended distance. I guess their ideal is 16 and a half feet. So I'm full of BS because I didn't read. 16 and a half feet. That's still double my viewing distance right now. Double what it is right now. No. For reference, I am sitting roughly 9 feet from a 165-inch diagonal screen. It is glorious. Glorious. Now, a caveat here is my screen is floor to ceiling, wall to wall. And I think this makes a huge difference because we as people have a difficult time in the vertical. And if screens get too big and they sit too high, it's very uncomfortable to watch. So my screen sits where my head is. I am looking between a third and halfway into the screen up. So I am at a very comfortable viewing position. My head goes straight ahead. I don't have to look anywhere else. That is the center of the screen. So to me, ideal should be more about where you can put the screen instead of the screen size. And I think floor to ceiling, wall to wall, IMAX style, right? That's how a lot of the IMAX screens were and still are, is the way to go. Absolutely. It creates this sense of scale that is unlike really any other home theater I've been in because I haven't been in another one that does this. If I put the screen up high, a couple feet off the ground, this wouldn't have worked. It'd be too tall. Would not have been comfortable, would not have worked. But floor to ceiling, I really think the bigger you can go, obviously within reason. Don't sit 9 feet from a 40-foot screen. That'd be dumb. But within reason, it makes total sense. Do I have a calculate? Can I calculate this? Like, can we? Let me see here. Does anybody have a calculator that'll actually tell me? That'll actually tell me what the viewing angle is? I think this one will. So 16 by 9, my viewing distance is 9 feet, and my diagonal is 165 inches. And that is so I have a current viewing angle of 67.3 degrees. Almost 70 degrees is my viewing angle on my screen. And that's not too much. THX recommends 40 degrees. I have no problem with 70. The immersion, off the charts. It is amazing. Maybe not for everybody, but don't get caught up in this idea that I've got to stay by the book of what X, Y, or Z or who X, Y, or Z tells me. In this case, THX. Don't do it. You got to experiment. What I tell all of my customers, let me get rid of this screen because we've done it. What I tell all of my customers is if you want to figure out what's right for you, if you don't have the projector already, get a cheap, really cheap projector. You can get used projectors for $100. You can, won't say another way to do it, but you can get a cheap projector, even if it's temporarily. Put it where it's going to be. If the theater's not done, get a folding chair or even sit on the floor. Ideally, a folding chair so you're at the same sitting height as if you had a couch. And tape off on the wall where the screen's going to go different sizes. Or even you don't even really need to do that. Just adjust the zoom on the projector to different sizes and find out what you like. This whole guessing game of I don't have a theater, how big of a screen should I go? I hate it because everyone is different. And the idea that what I like is exactly what you're going to like, great. It absolutely might. What I like is exactly what you're going to like. Or furthermore, what works in your room is ridiculous. So what I encourage people to do is take a projector, sit where you're going to sit, and fire it at the wall, and then adjust the screen size until you find something that works for you, both usability-wise and aesthetically. Because aesthetics are just as much a part of this as the usability part. It's got to look good. I say this time and time again. If the space is not inviting, if the space does not look good, we as people, because we are physical beings, meaning we appreciate, a lot of us, how things look, how things make us feel. If the space is uninviting and it doesn't go well together, you're subjectively and not subjectively, subconsciously, in my opinion, I did not get a degree in psychology. It's just from my experience, going to use the room less. If you like the way the room looks, you enjoy the space, it is a comfortable space, you are going to use the room more. So I think absolutely it is important for usability, the objective part of this, to go with the aesthetic part of this. They go hand in hand. Hand in hand. Hand in hand. They go hand in hand. So it's really important that you use these things together. Okay. Looking at comments here. Torsten says, I sit roughly 120 inches from 120-inch screen. Still wish it was bigger. Yes, I'm in the kind of guy in the front rows to come. But that's the way to go. That is how I go. And because that's what I like, that's what I'm going to use at home. I've got a 67, 68 degree viewing angle. And I didn't know what I was going to expect. I built this. I've said this story before. I built that front wall. I chose that screen size because I was lazy. I did it because, well, if I just do an acoustically transparent screen that is the entire front wall, I don't have to build a front wall. I can just put up like 3 2x4s and I'm done. And if it's too big, I can use manual masking. Well, it wasn't too big. There's no manual masking to be seen. So my ingenuity, like I think for a lot of engineers, the ingenuity came out of laziness. So that's where my idea was born. So Torsten, I'm fully on board with your thought there. Ollie Alil says, I have been using a CIH and my sweet spot is 1.5 to 2 times the height. I think the CIH sitting distance should always be based on height. Yeah, what is my height? Let's look at what my height is. That actually may be a good way to look at this. Alil, hold on. Let's look at this. Projector screen calculator. So my 165. So my height, okay, I am not that at all. I am not that at all. My height is roughly 80 inches, and I sit like 110, 108 inches from my screen. And this would say I need to sit 160. So if it's 160, how far is 160? 160 divided by 12. That's 13 feet. That's better than 16 and a half feet. So a little, I can get behind that. Oh, you say 1.5 times. 1.5 times. Okay. So 1.5 times the height. So if we do 80 times 1.5, yeah. 1.5. My man. That's great. I love that idea. I'm pretty close. I'm within a foot, half a foot of 1.5 times. That is fantastic. I love that idea. We should print that. That should go into the CDA recommended practices right there. 1.5 times. Yes. Love it. Jeffrey says, definitely agree that I don't want my image higher. Don't want that neck pain. Yes. That's what kills a lot of people. But aesthetic. This comes up all the time in living rooms. Living rooms are for living. Hence the name. They're multi-purpose room. I see all the time, especially on Reddit, where people will poo-poo all over somebody that has put a TV above a mantle on a fireplace. And while that's not ideal, it is ideal for that room. If you take the TV off of the mantle it takes up a tremendous amount of wall space. And what typically goes above mantles? Mirrors, pictures, big picture thing. So that's a great place for a TV. Not an ideal location because of its height, but usability wise, great place because you're not dominating the room by having a TV on some wall. So, not ideal usability wise, but definitely ideal aesthetically. And if you sit far enough away from that TV and angle that TV aggressively enough, my TV is angled quite aggressively in the living room. And it's a 77, so it's not small. And I sit pretty far away from it, but it's not for the main viewing when I'm watching something. And it's watching a football game or something in the living room, still great. But I need that room to be more than TV. I need that room to be utilized more than watching something. So, TV above mantle, acceptable. I don't understand why people get on this high horse of, oh, you can't do that. And I actually think a big part of why they do that is because the majority of those people don't have those spaces. There is no other space in my living room for a TV. None. Wouldn't go anywhere else. And some people may argue, well, that's bad design. I'm not designing an entire room around a TV. That's what a theater room's for, or a media room, or something else, when I can make less compromises in other ways. Go make a TV room if that's what you want to do. The living room should not be that. And the same thing goes on for sound bars. People poo-poo on sound bars. You cannot, in a lot of these spaces, put dedicated speakers. It reduces the function of the room. Sound bars are a compromise, but they have a great usability when used correctly. And you understand, yes, I am compromising on audio for this aesthetic or usability case. That's okay. If you want to use something else, have a dedicated viewing room. Don't do it in the living room. It's not worth it. It's not worth having that fight with the spouse. And I see this is unfortunate on AVS where people are like, well, you married the wrong person. It's everything about being in a relationship is about, I didn't think this conversation would go this way, but it's about compromising for each other's wants and desires. And if your partner doesn't want that, just say, okay, well, can we do something somewhere else in the house that's not eating into that? And you're going to be able to get more out of that space because you can put big, ugly, dedicated subwoofers in there, dedicated speakers, a bigger screen, potentially uglier seating that's more comfortable. All of these things that you would then not be able to do in this other space become possible avenues. So use spaces to how they should be utilized to their fullest extent. Don't try and jam something in there that's not really going to work. I understand that some people don't have any other spaces, but less is more, people, in a lot of these applications. Less is more. Unless it's screen size, then you go as big as you can. Is the distance also going to depend on your projector quality? No screen door used to be an issue. Potentially. It's more resolution and being able to pick up pixel densities. This is a big issue. I haven't looked at virtual VR in a long time, but this was a big issue in VR with Flight Sim where you could see the pixel grid, and it's very much resolution. The higher the resolution, the lower the ability to pick that up. So if you're running a lower resolution projector and you get into a really big screen, potentially, and that's where resolution can become a thing, can become a factor. But it's a lot less than people would think. Even 1080p on a big screen, I don't know that I would really worry about it. And most projectors that are, they're going to be E-shifters anyway. They're not going to be 1080p unless you've got something that's quite old. So my thought and recommendation is don't really worry about resolution. But if you're buying something new, do at least an E-shifter. Don't get 1080p. You're putting yourself on the back foot anyway. JJ Mustang says, currently 11 feet from a 120 wide scope screen, thinking about moving to a 130 wide and decrease the distance to 10 feet. Yes. Yes. This is the way. Go bigger if you can. I'm at 145 inches wide, which is 165 inch 16 by 9. One thing to consider, though, when you start going to these bigger and bigger screen sizes is if it's not a TV, the projector is eventually going to run out of gas. So you've got to consider what is the acceptable brightness. And that goes hand in hand. Screen size, brightness. Screen size, brightness. How much brightness am I trying to get? Because as I increase the screen size, my brightness is going to go the opposite direction. So we're going screen size, brightness. Screen size, brightness. So you've got to weigh how far can I compromise on either direction to get what I'm after. Now you could get a more of a light capable projector, right? That can absolutely be a thing. So if you go to these bigger screens, QL series, you've got cheaper options, not necessarily in the QL, but the 860 from Christie. You've got the new Hisense, that 6,000 lumen, though I've never seen it. You've got the higher end Christie's, obviously, but your potential picks that you could utilize for brighter images on these larger, it deteriorates and the price can go up. So it's something to consider. Mustang, if you're in the US, we can have a conversation about screen sizes. I just want to make sure, like anybody, if you guys have questions about anything, I want to make sure, regardless if you buy from me, that what you're doing, you know what you're getting yourself into. Like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Because if you do all this stuff and go, oh, well, this isn't what I thought, that's not a fun place to be. And I want to make sure that you know as much of this information as possible up front before we go down that path so that you can make the best decision you can. And back to what we said at the very beginning of this topic, one of the best ways to do that is fire the projector without the screen. Overscan an existing screen if you have one. Zoom it out. See if that brightness is acceptable. Obviously, it's going to look like crap off the screen, but see if the brightness that you're seeing on screen is acceptable. If you overzoom to the measured screen size, there's ways that you can augment this by using things like a Studio Tech 130, gain the 30% off of a neutral gain screen. We can reinforce this in other ways, but you've got to decide what pathway, what end result am I chasing? And then we use tools to get to that end result. In this case, projector screens, the room, all that stuff. All this stuff should be looked at as a tool instead of looking at the other way around of how far can I take this? You need to try and get an end goal, and then we use the tools that you have or are acquiring to get to that end goal. Jeffrey asks, what screen material do you have again? I know when I saw Youth Men's Theater, I see his weave. I think his front row is 9 feet from 150, which is similar viewing distance. So there's 2 screens that I would recommend for this. I have the Stewart Harmony G3. It's a very thin weave. It's roughly a 0.68, 0.7 gain screen. Great screen. The other screen that I'd recommend is a Seymour Screen Excellence Neo. The Neo is the counterpart to the Harmony. Just be careful because there's actually 2 different versions of the Neo. Depending on the screen height, you're going to get one of 2 different options. The normal Neo has a much tighter weave, more equivalent to what the Harmony G3 has. The other Neo has a bit wider weave that is used on bigger, taller screens because they're limited on the loom process. So just when you're going down that pathway, if you have questions about any of this, which I can help with, we can tackle that. But I have a Harmony G3 currently, and it's fantastic. But the Seymour Screen Excellence Neo is also an excellent, excellent option. They're both great. Jeffrey, and this goes back to the TV question we were having. Totally agree. We have 70 inches above the mantle in the living room and are pretty far away and lounging. It's fine. Yeah, it's a lounge space. It is not my critical viewing space. It's like saying, I'm going to do critical listening on a soundbar. No, you're not. If you have other avenues or you're serious in the space, you're going to have speakers somewhere else. That's what you're going to do. Don't do that. That's an enjoyment space, ambient space. Use it for what it's used for, what it's designed for. Margaret says, how's it going? Have you watched Dragon Ball Super Broly yet? I did watch that. I'm into anime. Not fully into anime, but I do enjoy me some anime. Broly back, baby. It's great. It's great. I love Brawley. It's fantastic. I did see that. I have not seen anything after that. That was a movie, wasn't it? Or was there a series? If it was a series, I've not seen it. I saw the movie. So no Black Swans Cap 4K's living room. The Black Swans, for a time, were in the living room. And I told my wife when I was doing that, oh, yeah, these speakers aren't much bigger than the F200s, the Martin Logan F200s, which were in the living room before that. Because I rotate speakers just to have things out for events and stuff when we do the like M-Wave when we're doing theater tours. We had that theater crawl where people came in from all over the country to do the theaters in Kansas City several months ago. I had Kef Blade 1 Metas in the living room. Before that, it was the F200s and the Black Swans. And I told my wife, oh, yeah, they're not much bigger than the F200s. Wrong. They are way bigger. I remember the boxes coming in and her sitting there and she going, is that the speaker? And I had to look at her and go, no, that's just the horn. That's just the part that goes on top. And it was, oh man, if looks could kill, I would have died. So those were in the living room. Never again. God, they're ugly. The Black Swan name is very fitting. There are pretty versions, the carbon fiber infused gold style. Those are pretty, but they're big and they're not great speakers for the living room because they dominate the space. They take away from the aesthetic of everything else. They just dominate it. Not great. In reference to screen material, I think when we saw your theater in January, we could see slightly moire, but I think you were changing. Yes, we did fix that. The moire's gone and we bias cut it more. It's quite heavy bias cut, but yeah, you can't see it anymore. It's gone. Loki says we have a multi-use room and an open floor pan, 36 feet to the kitchen, 11 feet to the screen from our recliners, 6 in ceilings at Martin Logan Towers Center. Yeah, if that's what you're doing and the space works for that and that's acceptable, that's great. I'm simply saying that you've got to compromise because usually not everybody in the house wants the same thing. If everybody does, great, makes things easy. If they don't, a lot of times it's better just to have a dedicated room for it. Ryan, what do you mean? My living room is pretty great theater space other than an opening at the back. I've shown you velvet. Yeah, I'm saying that they can be, but in a lot of applications with partners, like I just said, you got to find a compromise. Marco Proxy, you'd go QL 7000 over Sony 8100, right? I just saw the QL and I like it a lot, but the lower contrast is definitely there and sometimes. This depends on use case. What are your goals? What are you trying to do? Again, people look at applications, I think, the wrong way. And I'm not saying you're wrong, Marco. I'm using this as a generality. They look at it and go, what is the best piece of equipment overall? Without looking at the entire system working cohesively together. Remember, all of these things is a sum of all of its individual parts. So you've got to define what you're trying to do. What is the end goal? What is this screen size I'm trying to do? How do I want to make myself feel? I think that's probably the most important thing that you do. If you come to me and say, I want to feel totally immersed, here is my budget. I'm going to give you, and you give me the limitations of the room because the room is kind of your canvas, right? The equipment is your paints and the paintbrushes. And the end goal is what you're trying to create, like the painting that you're trying to create. How we get there and what style, what level, all of this stuff is then dictated by the tools we have at our disposal and the end goal that you're trying to get to. So, Marco, that really depends on where you're trying to go. If you're going to like 115-inch screen, absolutely the hell not. Do not do a QL 3000 or 7000. Wrong projector. I would argue in that context that a JVC NZ500, NZ700, NZ800, depending on the brightness, depending on, your motion needs and stuff. Much better projector for that application because it's a smaller screen. You can get away with less brightness. Go on big screens, totally changes. QL 3000, QL 7000, game changer. You are sacrificing contrast to get that back. The compromise then becomes I'm spending more money in order to gain that contrast back. You're entering Barco, you're entering Christie territory in order to get that native contrast back. And that comes down to why the budget is so important. Some people will say, oh, well, I don't need your budget. And that may apply if you have oodles and oodles of money, but not everybody is to that point. So budget and establishing that at the get-go, how much can we allocate to this project? You got enough to do an M4K? Amazing projector. One of the best out there. But if that's not in the cards, and that's okay, we've got to figure out how to augment that. And you could augment your blacks by maybe a gray screen, but then we're augmenting and potentially creating issues on the white points because remember, it's always a give and take. There's always a compromise. We're always changing something. You can't have everything for free. Can't have everything at once because the other compromise is I'm spending more. So you're always giving up something. So Marco, that a long story short, potentially. Macro, not Marco. Macro. God, I'm an idiot. I'm sorry. I'll get to your next comment, Macro, here in a minute. Loki, 85-inch Sony Omwa I plan to use for sound and picture with an extra circuit, just the wall. I think it looks. That's perfect. If it fits the bill for you, it is the correct choice. Don't let people tell you you're wrong. What do you think of the XF material of Seymour? XF. What is XF? Let's look at this. Hold on. What is XF? Seymour screen materials. XF. Okay, that's screen excellence. I want to duplicate that. I want to go back. AV. Screens. XF. What is XF? Do you mean XD? Do you mean XD? Or is it the extra fine? Why is it not listed? Or ultra fine? Percy, enlighten me. I think it's the UF. I don't have enough experience with the UF to tell you. And I don't like making recommendations on things that I have not experienced. If it's similar to the Neo, I don't have a problem with it. I think it's a little wider. I think if you want a thinner weave, just go with the Neo. So Macro says he has it's very good. I would go with the Neo. Neo's tried and true. I don't have experience with the Ultrafine. It doesn't mean it's bad. Here's what I would tell you to do. Get screen samples. Get a screen sample of the XD. Get a screen sample of the Ultrafine. Get a screen sample of the Neo. Put them all side by side and make a determination which one you like more. I can help with that. If you're in the States, we can get you some screen samples. Shoot me a message. For anybody interested in needing any help, here's my contact info. Just scan that. And it'll take you to the contact page. You can fill it out. I think my phone number's on the contact page. Do not hesitate to text me or call me. That's quite okay too. If I don't answer, just text me. It's okay. But we can get you some screen samples because it's really important to see things before you do things so you know what you're getting. Because I don't want you to get something and go, oh, well, that's not what I was expecting. That's not what we want. And that's not a good feeling to have. That pit in your stomach where you're like, ah, crap, I wasted a bunch of money. I wasted a bunch of time. That's not cool. We don't want to go down that pathway. So don't do that. Check it. Look at it before you do it. That's important. Margaret says, have you heard the JBL Studio 2 Zimwall has found them here in China, but I can't find any legit info on them. I don't know if it's China naming Studio 2. JBL Studio 2. The Studio 2 6 ICs? So the Studio 2, these, if I remember right, replaced previous speakers. I know nothing about them. Somebody wanted this specific speaker. They already had JBL. They wanted these specific ones. So I sold some not too long ago. If they fit the bill for what you're trying to do, great. And these actually may not be the new ones. These may be the older ones. But they do exist. They are real JBL product, Margaret. So don't let that be a detractor. See, Thibble, this is a little different. If you build them and they're part of the aesthetic, I understand that. My wife would shoot me multiple times, probably in unsavory places, if the Black Swans came back. Because I have a dedicated room. And she was tolerant of she's tolerant of certain things. Like she was tolerant of the kef. She's tolerant of what I do, with the idea that it's part of my business. If I was doing this and I wasn't doing this for a living, I'd be divorced. She would not tolerate it because there's no other side to it. There's no income associated with it. So I'm doing it as a business, right? I'm doing it for business needs. So I kind of envy you being able to do that. That is nice. I would probably be castrated if that happened to me. Yeah, not Marco, Macro. I'm sorry. StarCraft 2 thing. I know StarCraft 2, though I didn't play it very much. I was more into Total Annihilation and Supreme Commander, but I totally get you on the macro front. And why did you change away from macro? Why'd you change away from Anthony? Pretty sure the Epson is the way to go. I really like some light. Yeah, if that's the direction you're going, the Epson's going to be the way of the world. So Macro says he's not sure the Neo and the Ultrafine are different. Yeah, there is some cross there. I feel like they are different, but maybe they're not. I have no idea. I'd need to get the materials and see or talk to Evan or Chris and ask. Now, Percy, it's not a big deal. We got what you meant. But I think that wraps it up. We had some good conversations about everything, about screen size, about the semantics of everything and why, and system as a whole, and all that stuff. I think that's really important. It's things that people need to consider. The sum of all of the parts together, not everything on its own. Don't just go, oh, this is the best. Oh, this is the best. So we're going to put them together and it's going to be the best. That is not what's going to happen. You need to get what works cohesively in your situation to create the experience that you're after. And not everything can do that because things are going to be different in different ways. And you're going to compromise in some way. In some level of performance or money or cash flow, there's going to be a compromise. So you got to figure out which direction you're trying to take it. And then we design a system from there. If you have any questions about that, do not hesitate to reach out to me. We can make that happen. Okay, so the playlist is a thing. If you guys do exclamation point playlist, you can get the playlist that I curate. There's a ton of good tracks, and there's everything but country on that playlist because I don't listen to country. So it's not that I hate it. It's just I don't listen to it. So everything but country is on this playlist. You got things from rap. You got things from electronic. You got smooth. You got jazz. You got all different kinds of stuff is on this playlist. So if you want to push your system to the limit or listen to some amazing music that I find on my voyages as I work in the theater in the Mad VR Experience Center, follow that playlist on Spotify or Tidal because I do update it. It'll be good. You'll enjoy it. But we're going to wrap it up here. The next stream is going to be the 17th. I don't know what the topic is. If you guys have any suggestions for topics, do not hesitate to drop them in the comments. I do read them. I try and reply to all of the comments, actually, positive or negative. I try and reply to all of them. So if you guys have any comments, do not hesitate to let me know. And don't hesitate to let me know if you have any suggestions for the next stream. I don't remember what the one on the 17th is, but it is scheduled for next week. I'll be off to Iowa for a home theater tour with some of the Kansas City guys on Saturday, so I don't think there'll be any streams this Saturday. But we'll reinvigorate next week. Home Theater Denmark, I'm sorry to hear that. He said his dad passed away. I'm sorry to hear that. Hopefully you're okay. Hopefully you're doing all right. Losing a loved one, especially one so close, it's always tough, but hopefully you're doing all right. I will see you guys all on the 17th. If Jonathan and I don't do anything on Friday, who knows? That stream does not operate on the schedule. So you might not. Who knows? But I'll see you guys next time. Enjoy your home theater journeys. Stay safe out there. See you later.